The final speaker in an evening of this kind is usually in the worst possible position because everybody wants to get back out. But tonight, I think, is an exception. I think you probably would all be grateful that we keep on going until spring comes. But let me just say a few things quickly. First of all, it's a pleasure to be listening to both of you, and I think that what each of you has to say resonates with my own experience and feelings that urbanism and architecture is one of the places where France is particularly strong now, a place where we have an enormous amount to learn. If I have to enumerate the things that I think are most potent in French civilization right now, they would include things like neorealist cinema and urban design, and I think that's a terrifically rich area. And let me just second the point, and I don't not say this as a board member, but as an itinerant journalist, that invariably, whenever I come upon somebody, someplace among the French haute fonctionnaires who is exceptionally alert, fluent, and obliging, it's always a former young leader from the French American Foundation, invariably. Let me just say a few things, if I might, because it gives me enormous pleasure, and honor is a cheapened word, but it is an honor to serve on this board, about why I think it matters. Some things that the Consul General and that Charles both were saying, I think, speak to it. One is that it is true, as Charles was saying, and if you look at the 5 largest economies in the world, France and the United States have things profoundly in common that the others do not. And what's so interesting about it, and it's the core of my own fascination, my own continuing fascination with Franco-American and Paris-New York matters, is that we both share everything and nothing. That is to say, our two countries are ones that went through the crucial experiences of modernity, the experiences of the Enlightenment, the experiences of the Industrial Revolution, the experiences of revolution and republicanism in ways that no other countries really have, and yet arrived at essentially and radically complementary but different approaches and different visions of what an Enlightenment society should be. You mentioned, one of them, the question of communities and communitarianism. I had a chance to do an interview with the French Minister of the Interior, Mr. Valls. A piece of it appeared in the New Yorker just this week. But part of it that I didn't have space to reproduce was the conversation just about this question of communities, because it is one where we seem to be speaking the same language, but turn out to be speaking very different languages. That is, we take it for granted as Americans. And communities are good things. Communities are building blocks. Communities are where we start. And there's a remote but completely understandable and articulate French suspicion of communitarianism as something that divides before it unites. Similarly, the way we use terms like secular and laïque are seemingly very, very much alike, and yet the longer one talks about them, the more significantly and fascinatingly different they become. The idea of laicity that pushes out the religious experience from the public space, and our idea of secularism, which is an idea of the mutual learned tolerance of communities sharing Republican space. These are, again, very seemingly alike, and yet the more you learn about them, the longer you experience them, the more significantly different they become. And I think it's exactly that experience of likeness and difference at the same time that draws us again and again to France, not just to be educated, but with that special allure and fascination that gives it an almost mythological dimension. I think you see it reflected in the kind of writing that's still present and fertile in talking about Franco-American things. On the one hand, we have that rich vein, which in my sadder 3 a.m. moments, which every writer knows a great deal of, I sometimes think I help begin of what we can only call Paris porn, where everything is better in Paris, where they raise children better and they make love better. And of course, anyone who knows Paris with any familiarity knows that that's the world of illusion, the world of cosmetic fantasy, in large part. And on the other hand, we have the world and the expression of a kind of relentless French fashion, which everything that happens in France is wrong or off. But the worst thing that could possibly happen to America, God forbid, is that we would ever have train system like the one in France, infrastructure like that in France, or God forbid, a health system like the one in France that had my wife, when she had a cesarean, insistently could not leave the clinic for 7 days because she had to be cared for, fed, and ready for her life as a mother, all of it, of course, covered by the community, covered by the French state. God forbid that any such thing should ever happen in the United States. And I think it's exactly, we have those two extreme cases always when we talk about France, exactly because of that fundamental and endlessly repeated experience of likeness and difference. Two countries born at the same time. I had a chance to write a long and in many ways rather tragic piece about a year ago about the American epidemic of incarceration. And one of the most interesting books that I had a chance to read by a Harvard professor who tragically just died before its publication, in which he was making the very non-American point that the French Declaration of the Rights of Man is in every way a superior document to the American Bill of Rights, exactly because instead of enumerating specificities, it enlarges on general principles, and that's a much healthier thing, something that takes the question of rights out of the narrowly judicial realm into the larger Republican realm. And as he points out, this is in large part because Thomas Jefferson wrote it. And it's those kinds of interpenetrations and those kinds of likenesses and differences that I think constantly draw us back and make us proud to be Franco-Americans. I hope you'll forgive me if I conclude with a story about one of my children. This is a thing I am often accused of doing to the point of nausea, but I am bound to do it here because everyone always asks me on occasions like this, or many people do, how Luke, my son, who was the hero of Paris to the Moon many years ago, is doing. He is now, of course, not a 7-year-old with blonde bangs and an obsession with Barney. He is a 19-year-old who is in college, but who still goes to Paris in the summers and spent this past, a big chunk of this past summer in Paris, first with 10 of his best friends that just all graduated from high school together, and then with his godparents in Paris, a true Franco-American couple, an American man and a French woman, happily married. And he said something to me when he, on his return, or rather his godfather reported it, that I thought spoke to many things. He said it was the first time he'd ever been alone in Paris, not with his family. And he said, you know, I've spent my life, though, countless times I've been in Paris, looking always at the choices on the left side of the menu, and I never before looked at the prices on the right hand of the menu. And he said, for the first time I found myself looking at the prices on the right side of the menu, and not just on the choices. And his mother and I, who are at the stage in life when we look at only the prices on the right side of the menu, and have long since forgotten about the choices on the left side of the menu, we're very impressed by the beginnings of wisdom in that remark. And also by the kind of core reality that that's what communal life, that's what life is all about. It's about choices and prices. And what we see so clearly, no matter how critical we are of aspects of France, no matter how much one might despair, as I often do in print, about American guns and American medical care alike, nonetheless, that we have prices and choices in life. And that when we make a choice for what we imagine is individual liberty, we pay the price of violence and homelessness. When we make a choice in France for solidarity and community, we pay a price, inevitably, in unemployment. We pay a price in social stasis, which is very real. And that computation of prices and choices, whether we're making them in restaurants or making them in societies, is the essential activity of understanding. And I hope and trust that this foundation remains devoted to that balance.